Hello, welcome back to the Domino Effect. I'm your host, Nicolette Sewell. I think everyone can agree that the last 2 years have brought on unprecedented financial uncertainties for our communities. Many people have used this time to pay closer attention to their credit. Some have even started small businesses. On this episode, local nonprofit organization, the Legal Aid Society of the Orange County Bar Association, will sit with Orange County's District 1 Commissioner, Nicole Wilson, to discuss the topics of housing, small business incorporation, and what you can do to ensure your financial well-being. This is the Domino Effect.
Hello, I'm Larri Thatcher, Deputy Director at the Legal Aid Society. I am joined by Commissioner Nicole Wilson to discuss issues facing our community. So welcome, Commissioner Wilson. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we're talking about issues facing the community. Tell me what kinds of issues your constituents are calling you about.
Oh, we have such a wide range of issues, and I am always so grateful that my constituents are comfortable calling us, and I want to continue to encourage them to call us with a wide range of issues. If they aren't sure if it's a local government issue, call. We can figure out where to send you. But right now there's been a lot of discussion about our rising rent costs across the county, and really it's been across the state and country. And the cost of living right now has been really high. So people are hurting and looking for help and trying to figure out how to navigate those very difficult lanes.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure that when they call you, they're looking for resources. And that's part of our discussion today, is what kinds of resources are out there. I work for the Legal Aid Society, and we're definitely a resource that you can send folks to. I know sometimes people have trouble wanting to reach out to us because we are a legal office, we're a nonprofit law firm. Let your constituents know, though, that anything they discuss with us is confidential, even the fact that they contact us. And even if it's not us they're contacting, if it's any law office at all to see about their legal rights, the fact that they're reaching out is confidential.
I love that you're bringing this up. It's such an important thing. I think people think of sometimes our judicial system at large as something very intimidating and punitive. And really, it's there for protection. It's there for justice. And so having the ability to reach out and ask questions in a confidential setting is so critical for our residents on all issues right now. The law changes every year, and it's a moving target for so many different topics here in Florida. So knowing that that's a confidential conversation is, I think, a huge, huge message that we should still, get out every chance we get.
Yes, excellent. And something that you mentioned made me think about, and the law changing, and the law is also very complicated, and so trying to keep up with it. So it's always best, if they're reaching out and they're having questions, that they do consult somebody, particularly with the rent. Rent stabilization. There's some topics and some discussion going on about trying to pass some legislation to affect the area. So we're trying to keep up on that, and so letting constituents know that. But also about when are they entitled to notice, and when can their rent be raised? Are you getting any questions about that?
It's spot on. We're getting questions, actually statements and then questions. And the statement is, oh my gosh, my rent went up, X amount. And I mean, when I tell you I've heard a wide range of jumps, is that legal? Can they do that? Can they do that and ask me to start paying that increase next month? Is it legal to ask me to do that in 2 weeks? Can they just keep my application fee? So there's been so many of these questions about what is and is not permitted under the law. And once again, I think people are more likely to sometimes reach out to us. So I'm so glad you're there as a resource, and let me know, hear what you're hearing also, so that we can continue to dialogue about how best to help people. We are making some decisions at the county level, trying to figure out within the scope of ordinances and county government what we can do. We're so limited because Florida statute really imposes some very strict limitations on what we can and can't do, but we're hoping to find some way to assist people, whether it is through a renter's bill of rights, whether it's changing some of our zoning so that we can get more inventory up and moving for people. But it's really a very complex issue.
Excellent. I think that's fabulous that even that our county commission is looking into the issues and trying to resolve some of them. But you're right about how complex it is. I think sometimes tenants don't understand, depending on where they're living, what their lease says. There may be local ordinances, there may be state law that applies, there may be federal law that applies. Right. And there are sometimes tenants that have leases and tenants that don't have leases, but they have verbal leases, and the laws are different between those two. So so I agree with you that what a fabulous question for that somebody should be reaching out and calling if their landlord is saying, I'm going to raise your rent with 2 weeks notice. So those are all great questions.
And all the answers to those depend, right?
Yes.
Because of the fact that if there is a lease, a contract, that's what's going to answer the question.
Correct.
If
Yes.
there's not,
Yes.
then those questions can be a little more complex. And in District 1 and in other parts of the county, we have even some transient type living situations where people are utilizing hotel rooms. And I'm grateful that sometimes those opportunities are there because that is safer than
Yes.
being on the street. But it's not ideal, and the protections for those type of renters are different.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought that up because you're right. It's also what we would sometimes refer to as a gray area of law. When they may be living full-time in a hotel. So are they considered transient, or is this considered a residential landlord-tenant situation? And so you're right, those are other great questions for constituents, and they should be pointed to appropriate resources for them. Excellent, good. Wow, well, it seems like your district is dealing with a lot.
We have a very diverse district, and I mean that in the way that, District 1 is West Orange County, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful district, and we have our biggest tourist destinations and some of our most really, I would say, preeminent type of employment opportunities. But we also have people who are really struggling because they are really making sort of the minimum that they can, and their expenses continue to go up. So we have a wide range of resident needs and issues, and I think, during COVID, the deck got shuffled. Yes. And so things really became more complicated. We had a number of residents that ended up being furloughed or laid off who decided to go into business for themselves. So we end up sometimes with questions there and, looking for resources for those individuals.
Excellent, yes. Well, it does. It sounds like you have a very diverse district. It sounds like they're very lucky to have you. And so I'm glad that we're here today discussing all of the kinds of issues that they're facing.
Yeah, so let me ask about my residents that do have small business thoughts.
Sure.
Right? And I think this comes up oftentimes when it's somebody who's never been in that sphere. They've worked for a larger company, they've been an employee, and they want to open a small business. They oftentimes don't know where to start, and I know it can put them in harm's way legally. How would you suggest where we send them, or where they need to go?
Excellent. Great question. So there's definitely, you can send them to us at the Legal Aid Society. There's also the Chamber of Commerce. There's also the Small Business Administration. There are a couple of other resources statewide that we could point them to. One of the most important things I would say when people are asking questions like that is they really definitely do need to consult legal. Because I think a lot of people think, well, I can just sort of hang my own sign up, or put the magnetic sign on my car and say I am a business and start doing business. But it's not necessarily that simple. There's a lot of stuff they need to think about and paperwork that they need to get done first. And so I think definitely telling them to start with legal is a great place to start. Starting with the local Chamber of Commerce. And there's even some specialty Chamber of Commerces. I know there's like a Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. There is a Chamber of Commerce for LGBTQ plus community. And so I definitely think there's some great resources out there. And that definitely, yes, they don't want to just suddenly decide, I'm in business for myself without looking at what are the kinds of issues they need to think about.
And when I talk to people who are endeavoring to this type of change, a lot of times it's because, they needed to financially. So they're worried about getting into even more debt by reaching out for help and getting legal help. So, how do I let them know that the resources aren't necessarily going to be cost prohibitive?
Yes. What I would do is probably start with letting them know there are actually a lot of free resources out there, and definitely we can point them to the places where they can start for free. Yes, that they don't have to start by spending money.
I can't think of anything more encouraging than free.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner. We're going to take a short break to share a few short messages with you and recognize our generous sponsors. We'll be back with more of the Domino Effect after this.
Until all our daughters are safe. Until all our children have families. Until all our families have homes. Until all our parents are cared for. We'll be here.
It's the domino effect. It is perpetual goodness. You help one person, you're helping that person's children, that person's parents, that person's loved ones, that person's community, other taxpayers, people they encounter, people they don't encounter. It's continuous. It's never ending.
Welcome back to the Domino Effect. I have Commissioner Wilson with me, and we're going to continue our discussion on small business incorporation. Commissioner Wilson, before the break, we were talking about constituents calling and asking you about opening their own businesses and doing small business incorporation. What other kinds of questions are they asking you about opening their own businesses?
Yeah, so much like everything right now, there's just a lot of unknowns. So sometimes they just want to know, what those barriers would look like if there were things that they needed to worry about with licensing, permitting, making sure that they are not violating code enforcement. And providing all those answers, it can be complex.
Yes, but they're great questions, and so we're really glad they're reaching out, right, and asking you about these things.
Absolutely, and it makes me very grateful for Legal Aid Society, for the staff at Orange County that can help me navigate some of the things that we take care of internally, and the things that happen that are outside of our local government, though, are sometimes, less likely for us to be able to resource. So we're grateful for you all to be there.
Thank you. And before the break, we mentioned, and I just kind of wanted to reiterate, there are some other great resources out there for your constituents, and not all of them are cost prohibitive. So there's the local Chamber of Commerce. There are some smaller targeted chambers of commerce, like the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. There's a Chamber of Commerce for the LGBTQ plus community. So there are lots of other resources out there. Not all of them are cost prohibitive. Some of them are actually even free. So I'm so happy to hear, though, that they are reaching out and asking those kinds of questions.
Yeah, it seems like there is a need even for people who sometimes have, gone back to their regular corporate job or their career path pre-COVID, and they're supplementing. So sometimes it's even a smaller side hustle type job, and they want to make sure they're protected and that they're protecting their family and sometimes even their house if they are leveraging some kind of debt.
Right. And I'm sure they have questions. We hear this term now that we're in a gig economy. And even if they have a regular full-time job and they're supplementing with something else, and maybe they're using their own car, maybe they're using their own cell phone, and I'm sure that they're having lots of questions about, well, how does that work? Do I get paid for this? Do I get reimbursed for that? Right?
And how do I pay my taxes on this? How do I make sure I'm doing the things I'm supposed to be doing to be compliant as a citizen and as a participant in our community?
Yes. And the taxes question, that's a great one, right? I don't even know anything about taxes. I have to ask somebody else.
Complex.
So yes. And you're right, those are things they need to think about, though, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, once again, it sometimes prevents people from doing things they can really excel in. And sometimes the businesses are really very simply, baking from home and delivering to birthday parties, doing signs for, for parties or events. But those people still need the structure. So, having them find a way to structure that business that provides them some security is really important.
Right. I agree. People are very resourceful, right? And creative and willing to work and do lots of different things. They just need the legal kinds of questions answered.
Exactly.
Excellent. Well, good. How about any other things that you're seeing in your district you want to talk about today?
Oh, it's been such a whirlwind, and I think, the residents in my district are, like you said, very creative, very diverse, and, there's been so many changes at the state level. There's been things of great concern to our young people and into some of our communities. I think recently the state legislature's movements in our LGBTQ plus community, and the feeling that they have, rightly so, that they are being discriminated against. And there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of unknown. And my concern, speaking to young people especially, is that they are feeling alone and isolated. So I really want to make sure they know that the legal system, the legal structure is still here for them, that we're still here for them.
Yes.
That as a local elected official, that they are supported and loved and seen.
Yes, that's great. And also that they know other resources exist too. I know one of the resources we greatly refer to is something called the One Orlando Alliance. And the One Orlando Alliance is this group of, I think, 40-something different member agencies that provide resources, particularly to the LGBTQ plus community. And there's a whole wide range of resources, from if you're a victim, and there's the Victim Resource Center. If you need counseling, there's counseling targeted. If you need legal, there's legal organizations that are part of that alliance. So that's a great resource for folks to reach out to.
And going back to the confidentiality topic, so I think making sure people know that when they do that those things are confidential, because the fear of reprisal right now is really the fear. I've had people ask me questions like, can they fire me for being, married to my, and I'm, right now in this country at this year, being fearful of being fired for who they're married to, being fearful for who they asked to prom, that there'll be some kind of legal ramifications. So even asking the question, I think, takes courage, and I want them to know they are protected and that they are safe. And so having Legal Aid Society, having the other resources, the nonprofits in our community to be able to send them to, really feels like a lifeline.
Yes, and that's the reason why we're doing this series. Again, it's called the Domino Effect. If they're afraid to ask questions, then things happen. If they're so afraid of reprisal and they, quit their jobs, then we get back to the housing issues that we were talking about before. And so I think yes, I agree. It all starts with them reaching out, asking questions, and knowing that there are resources available when they're dealing with these issues. So,
fantastic.
Yes, excellent. Wow. Well, any other kinds of issues or questions they're asking about?
Well, there's obviously been so much in terms of housing and in employment. And it's interesting because I think everyone's hiring right now. And so you see this sort of really incomplete staffing in so many places. But a lot of it's because people are transitioning into other careers and career paths. There's been a lot of different opportunities for training and for other options. And those people are oftentimes reaching out about what it means for them in their life for here in the community. How does this, what's this going to do to my debt? What is this going to do to my housing situation? Will I be able to fill out, my mortgage application and endure this time? And Orange County had rental assistance for quite some time. It is wrapping up, but there are still, I believe, things available and resources for those folks.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'd like to take a moment to recognize our generous sponsors. When we come back, we're going to dive into the topic of predatory lending and other consumer issues. We'll be right back with more of the Domino Effect after this.
The greatest challenges we faced with COVID was access to services. So right at the beginning, everything closed. Therapy paused, tutoring, mentors, all these social supports and community supports that these children had. And when school being out, a lot of those kids, that's where they eat. So it was really challenging in the beginning. I think definitely lots of adaptation that we had to do, but we're doing it.
Can health insurance help cure loneliness? Can it take care of your best friend too? Or hold your hand for 9 months? Can it be there for you at 3 a.m.? Or inspire you to go the extra mile? We think so, which is why every day we ask ourselves, what else can health insurance do? Come find out.
I understood his background and where he was coming from, being in the military, and having that background myself. I knew he needed to feel me out and see what kind of guy I was before he was going to trust me to handle his situation. So as I would have in the military, I gave it to him like it is, and then said, now that you know that, let's go see what kind of deal we can make. That's the reward at the end of the day. It's not about money, it's not about prestige, it's about making a difference in somebody's life.
After my 20 years in the military, trusting somebody, like I trust Jay and he take care of me, it's kind of hard for me to trust anybody. He's a good, very good man. Very good man. It's like one of my buddies in the military. I can turn my 6, which is my back, and I know I can trust him. He won't do no harm. He gonna help me out.
Welcome back to the Domino Effect. I'm Larri Thatcher, and I'm here with Orange County District 1 Commissioner Nicole Wilson to discuss various issues facing our communities. Commissioner Wilson, before the break, we were talking about folks who are transitioning in jobs and maybe putting together 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet, and then being worried about how does that affect their consumer ratings and things to look for.
Exactly. Their fear about how that's going to affect either their application for a rental property or their mortgage application or their credit score. All of those things become a concern, and you really, want to see people pursue their career development and pursue their educational goals and try to overcome those obstacles. So, trying to navigate that is difficult.
Yes. Well, I think that's another great area we can talk about. There are some resources out there for folks. One of the great resources I love to refer people to is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And they have a website that is consumerfinance.gov. And it's a great resource for folks for anything to do with consumer, their mortgage applications, their credit scores, things like predatory lending. One of the things, I don't know if your constituents are seeing it, but we're hearing from a lot of folks that particularly when they're in this situation, they transitioned, during COVID, they might have lost a job and they've transitioned to a new job. They're being told when they fill out applications, we'll leave spaces blank and we'll fill that in later. Are you hearing about that?
Yes, and concern about what that means and what is that going to entail in the future?
Yes. And another great resource for that is the Federal Trade Commission's website, the ftc.gov, because that's a really big red flag. And so we always tell folks, no, if you're filling out an application, whether it be for a mortgage, whether it be for some sort of credit, whether it's for a rental, do not leave blank spaces and let somebody else fill it in. We've actually had some folks tell us that they were, they might report, this is my current income, and they're being told, well, let's just bump that up higher. And so they watch somebody else fill out false information on those applications. And so we tell them, no, that's a big red flag. You don't want to do that.
What could be the implications of that? Or what would be, something that you could see coming from something like that type of activity?
Well, one of the big things that we see coming from that is in the area of predatory lending is that the lender, if the lender is asking you to bump up your income, it probably means that you don't qualify for this loan, which means you're probably not going to be able to afford the loan, which means it's designed to fail. It's designed so that you will not be able to pay off this credit card, not be able to pay off this loan, not be able to pay off this mortgage. And then that's going to get you into foreclosure situation, debt collection situations, lots of implications then once you let your credit spiral down to a certain level.
Right, and I think, it's so important for people to understand that the motivation behind someone telling you that may be that they get paid oftentimes just on the application coming in or just on having filtered these people, funneled people into the system. And, just seeing sort of that business model as something that you have to be very cautious and maybe double check, call for some assistance, call my office, call your office.
Yes, yes. And I would say, definitely, I go back to what we call the red flags, which some of these resources, if they go on their websites and they'll see, lots of talk about the red flags. If somebody is being very aggressive in trying to get someone to sign up for a loan, a mortgage, a credit card, and asking for the false information, even though the constituent needs the money, needs the loan, and has a good reason for it, they have to stop and think, this is going to affect me if I allow this to continue and happen. And so there are some great resources they should check out before they get into any kind of lending situation.
That preparation is everything.
Yes, it is. Education, right?
Education, preparation, a little research will go a long way, and just, making sure that you're checking with friends and neighbors even, I think is also, advisable. A lot of times people have really good advice and experience to pass along, and I try to absorb all of that. When anybody who has been through something and has learned the hard way, I don't want to learn the hard way. I want to learn the lessons they've learned, and it's something that I think, as a community, we need to keep an eye out for each other.
Yes, and I agree with you. I like that idea because reading through contracts, so that's another thing. We're always told, read your whole contract, read every last word. But a lot of times these contracts are so complicated. Who can understand them, right? But if maybe you've had a neighbor or a friend, a relative, a church member that you can go to who may have experienced this before, and they can say, oh, I learned the hard way about that, right?
Exactly. Look for this line.
Yes.
Keep an eye out for, this time frame. And it's absolutely cautionary tales are out there for a reason, and I think it doesn't have to be a shameful thing. We've all had our ups and downs out in the consumer world, and we should be able to learn from each other.
Yes.
And share that information. I think the other one that comes up is sometimes, if they don't give me a price up front for something, a large ticket item, and they say, well, we'll work with you on it.
Yes.
What does that mean for consumers?
Yeah. Well, I would call that a big red flag, right? You would always want to know your pricing up front. And then particularly if you're financing something, you need to know what is the finance rate they're charging you. There are some federal laws out there when you're financing something or you're being offered extended credit where they have to tell you what is your finance rate, how much is this going to cost you over the life of the loan. And that's sometimes when you look at that information, that's really powerful. That's really powerful information to be able to say, okay, if you're financing something, let's say for 4 years, and then you look on that contract and you see that at the end of the 4 years, I will have paid, sometimes almost as much as the purchase price of the item in just interest alone. Hopefully that might give you pause to stop and say, wait a minute, this might not be such a good deal.
Exactly, and I think that holds true for so many things as far as really taking a step back and thinking about the lifespan of it.
Yes.
And I also think having to try to prioritize when people are going through difficult times. And I've talked to residents, constituents who find themselves either after an illness with some medical bills that have piled up or after some kind of a job transition or educational transition. And they're trying to decide, do I pay this first and just sit on this one, and which one is going to be the one that bites me, and what happens if I don't do this right away? Are they going to come and take this away from me? And whether that's their house or their car.
Yes.
And so it's a very intimidating thing to approach those finances.
And actually, I will tell you, those are all great questions, because you're right, even if once you've gotten yourself into a loan and then you can't pay, then the questions come up, where do we go from here? One of the things that we do in our office, and there are some other local nonprofits that do a lot of what we call community education and outreach. We will come into the community and hold seminars, a lot of times nights or weekends, to answer questions. Not necessarily, sometimes I can't answer everyone's individual specific legal questions, but we can give general information on a topic like, yes, how do I decide which creditor I am going to pay? What happens if I don't pay which particular creditor? There's a difference if you don't pay your credit card versus if you don't pay your mortgage. And so what creditor do I pay first? What happens if I don't pay? Those are all great questions that, again, constituents should ask and should seek out resources for, including community seminars, most of which, definitely if we're holding a seminar, it's free. But like I said, there are a lot of other organizations out there that hold these kinds of seminars for free.
I love that, because I think in the end, everyone is benefited across the board by having those things resolved, because people can continue to contribute to the economy if they're not so fearfully either, addressing only one of their outstanding debts, or really trying to be so overly cautious or just not participating because they don't understand the ramifications of either a smaller loan or what an outstanding bill might mean.
Exactly. And, keeping them participating in the economy sometimes means, yes, we need to keep you housed, right? We need to keep your utilities on. And so we need to look at what are your bills, what can you pay, what things can we put on payment plans and things like that, right?
Absolutely. And we have so many great things at the county that every chance that I get, I try to let people know about through our community action board, as far as being able to assist with utility and being able to assist with things like even our senior housing, air conditioning. We can provide some assistance there. And we also have neighborhood grants. So I try to encourage people, reach out, and if it's something that we can refer and have a community partner like you all help with. But sometimes we also have things in-house that we really want to be able to link our residents to.
Excellent, excellent resources. Well, thank you. We appreciate the support of Commissioner Wilson's office, and we're happy to continue offering our services to Orange County's District 1 residents. Thank you.
The Legal Aid Society has existed for over 60 years, providing legal representation to clients on issues similar to those discussed in this episode. The Legal Aid Society wants residents to know that when faced with legal troubles, you are and should still be able to receive high-quality legal representation and access to justice regardless of your income. If you reside in Orange County District 1 and have questions about your local laws and regulations, you may contact Commissioner Nicole Wilson's office by calling 407-836-7350. If you are seeking assistance on a legal matter such as consumer debt, family law, housing, even immigration, contact the Legal Aid Society law firm by calling 407-841-8310. The Legal Aid Society is a nonprofit law firm that relies greatly on volunteerism and donations. For more information on how you can help the organization keep its doors open, visit www.legalaidocba.org. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Domino Effect, and remember, perpetual goodness goes a long way.